The first time she ran from him, the sun was sinking low behind the desert ridge, turning the whole land a deep golden fire. The wind carried the dusty scent of wild horses, and somewhere far off, a lone hawk cried across the sky. That was the moment her life changed. One kiss. Just one. A kiss she never meant to give and never thought she would feel. Yet when his hand brushed her cheek and his lips touched hers, the world stopped for a breath, and her heart began beating a way she had never known. She pulled away as if burned, terrified of what she felt, terrified of what she saw in his eyes. The Apache warrior named Roken stood still as stone, watching her flee through the open plain, and his voice traveled after her with a promise that struck deeper than she expected. "Go ahead and run. I will find you." She had never heard a man sound so sure. That certainty scared her more than anything else. In a land where danger hid behind every cedar tree and every canyon shadow, certainty was rare. But Rokan spoke like nothing in the world could stop him, and maybe nothing could. It was known. Across the frontier for his tracking skill, his courage, the way he moved through the desert as if it was part of him. Folks in nearby towns whispered about him at night, calling him the Silent Storm. Some said he carried the spirit of the mountains in his blood. Others said he had survived things no man should survive, yet he had never spoken a soft word to any woman until her. And she never imagined an Apache warrior would ever look at her the way he did that day near the corral. Her name was Lyria, and she had come west with hopes of starting over. She wanted a place where she could breathe without judgment, where no one knew her past, and where she could rebuild the pieces of herself she thought she had lost forever. But the frontier was harsher than the stories she had heard. The winters were long, the summers burned the skin, and danger rose fast from men who believed the land belonged only to them. Still, she stayed because something inside her knew she belonged to the wide-open sky more than she ever belonged to any town she left behind. She first met Rokan on a day when dust storms swept across the plains. She had been trying to calm a frightened mare in the ranch yard, her hands trembling from the sudden roar of the wind. Hooves pounded behind her as the ranch hands shouted for everyone to get to safety. The mare reared up, ready to crush her under its weight, but someone caught the reins with steady force. When she looked up, she saw Rokan holding the horse with a calm strength she had never witnessed. His eyes were sharp, fierce, but also strangely gentle. She had never seen anyone so at home in chaos. She thanked him, her voice unsteady, and he nodded as if he understood everything she didn't say. From that day on, their paths kept crossing. Sometimes by chance, sometimes because he seemed to appear whenever trouble lingered close. He never spoke much. He never asked why she always looked like she was one breath away from running. But he watched her with the quiet patience of a man who understood what fear could do to a person. And though she kept her distance, she could not forget the strength in his presence. Yet nothing prepared her for the moment he kissed her near the horse paddock that evening. Nothing prepared her for how her knees weakened or how her breath froze. The land was warm with the glow of late sun, and the horses behind them fell silent, almost sensing something they could not explain. Roken moved with a slow, certain calm, giving her every chance to step back. But she didn't, not until the instant their lips touched. That was when she felt everything at once. Hope, fear, attraction. She never allowed herself before. The truth that she had been hiding from, and it terrified her. Because Lyria had not come west to be found. She had come west to disappear. She had come to outrun a man who once claimed her future as if it was his right. She had come to escape the life she was forced into, and she had sworn never to let her heart belong to any man again. She didn't know how to tell Rokan any of that, and she feared that if she told him, he would step into danger because of her. So when the feeling inside her grew too strong to control, she did the only thing she knew how to do. She ran. Her boots pounded against the dry earth as she fled toward the edge of the ranch. Her breath came sharp. Her heart raced. She didn't want him to follow, but part of her already knew he would. She reached the old wooden fence line and climbed over it, stumbling into the tall grass. The sun dipped lower, and the sky turned to streaks of orange and gray. For a moment she stopped, placing a hand on her chest, trying to calm the storm inside. But then she heard his voice again, deep and steady. It wasn't loud, yet it carried across the open land with a weight she couldn't ignore. "Go ahead and run. I will find you." Something in those words sent a shiver through her. Not fear in the way she had felt before, but something different, something she didn't dare name. She turned back only once and saw him standing beside the horses, the wind pushing his long hair back, the sunset lighting his face in a bold amber glow. He looked like he belonged to the very soul of the land, and she didn't know whether that made her want to run faster or stop altogether. She moved through the fields as night crept over the plains, passing the scattered stones and thorn bushes that marked the trail. Coyotes howled from far off, and the horses behind began their restless stamping. She kept running, hoping distance would clear her mind, but each step only deepened the weight inside her. Why did that kiss shake her so much? Why did his voice echo in her chest as if she belonged to it? Lyria reached the edge of the ridge where the land dipped into a narrow canyon. The shadows there were colder, darker. She knew this place wasn't safe for anyone walking alone after sundown. The canyon had taken lives before, but she felt too shaken to turn back. She leaned against a rock, holding her arms around herself as if she could quiet her own heartbeat. Then she heard something behind her. Not footsteps. Something quieter. The sound of a man who moved like a shadow. She felt her breath catch as she slowly turned her head. The wind shifted, stirring the grass around her, and for a second she didn't see anything, but she sensed him. She felt his presence. The same way she had felt it that day in the dust storm. Rokon was near. She didn't know if he would be angry or calm. If he would demand answers or simply look at her the way he always did. She didn't know what she would say if he did find her. She only knew one thing for certain. That kiss had changed everything, and nothing in her world would be the same now that he had spoken those words. She pressed her back against the cold rock as the night deepened. Her breath trembled. Somewhere in the dark, a low sound drifted through the canyon. Not threatening, not rushed. Steady voice carried by the wind, as if the earth itself wanted her to hear it. Lyria, her heart nearly stopped. The sound came again. Lyria, you should not run from what is true. She closed her eyes, torn between fear and something far more dangerous. And before she could move, before she could breathe again, the faint outline of a figure appeared near the canyon path, walking toward her with a calm she could not understand. Rokon had found her, and what he planned to say next would change far more than just a single kiss. Rokon stepped into the canyon with the slow, certain stride of a man who knew the land better than he knew his own heartbeat. The moon was rising. Behind him, silvering the edges of his hair and casting a soft glow around his shoulders. Lyria felt her knees weaken as she watched him approach. She had run as far as her breath allowed, but now she stood still, unable to move, unable to speak. The way he looked at her made the night seem quieter, as if the world paused to hear what would happen next. He stopped only a few steps away, giving her space. She felt the weight of his gaze, steady and unreadable. She tried to look brave, but her hands trembled slightly against the cold stone. Rokon noticed. He didn't reach for her, didn't speak right away. He simply watched, waiting for her to gather the courage she had been running from all evening. You should not be alone out here, he said at last. His voice carried a warmth she didn't expect. You know, the canyon shifts after dark. The rocks are loose. The trails change with the wind. Anything could happen. Lyria swallowed hard. She wanted to tell him she could take care of herself, that she had survived worse, that she didn't need anyone watching her. But the words wouldn't form. Instead, she looked past him toward the open fields where the faint shapes of wild horses moved like shadows in the distance. I needed air, she whispered. He nodded slightly. You needed to run. His words struck deeper than she expected. She looked down, feeling her heart twist in her chest. She didn't answer. She didn't know how. Rokon seemed to understand even without her saying anything. When the wind brushed through the canyon, stirring dust between them, he stepped a little closer. Not threatening, not forceful. Just close enough that she could see the flicker of emotion in his dark eyes. Lyria, I will not harm you. You know that I know, she breathed, but her voice cracked. He noticed again. She could see it in the way his jaw tightened, in the way his eyes softened. Rokon was a man known for his strength, his bravery, his mastery of the land. But she could see now that he carried something else too. A quiet patience that unnerved her more than any danger in the plains. "Tell me why you ran," he said. She almost did. She almost let everything spill out. But the truth held too much pain, too much fear, too many memories she had buried beneath miles of desert and silence. "I can't," she whispered. He breathed in slowly, like a man choosing his next step with care. Then he looked past her, toward the ridge wall and the path behind her. "You came far without knowing where you were going." She felt heat rise in her cheeks, embarrassed by how frantic her escape had been. "I just needed to get away. Away from me," he said. She shook her head quickly. "No, away from everything." Roken studied her for a long moment. She felt exposed under his gaze, as if he could see all the pieces of her she had tried so hard to hide. He stepped back just enough to give her room to breathe. Then he motioned toward a small ledge along the canyon wall. "Sit, rest a moment. The night is not safe for wandering." Lyria hesitated, but exhaustion settled heavy in her limbs. She moved toward the ledge and sat, drawing her knees close. Roken remained standing, keeping watch at the canyon entrance, as if guarding her. From the shadows, the land was quiet except for the faint whisper of wind moving through the rocks. The scent of sagebrush drifted around them. Far off, a horse whinnied, restless. Roken finally spoke again, his voice low. "You are carrying something heavy. Something that makes you look over your shoulder even in daylight. Something that makes your heart jump at the smallest sound." She stared at the dirt beneath her boots. He wasn't wrong. Every step she took in this new land had been shadowed by the memory of a life she tried to leave behind. She had come west to escape danger, to find freedom. But fear had followed her like a ghost. Roken continued. "I do not know your past, Lyria, but I know when a spirit has been hurt. I know when someone fears being seen for who they are." She felt her breath catch. No one had ever spoken about her that way. No one had ever noticed the things she tried to hide. He turned toward her, his silhouette framed by moonlight. "When I look at you, I see strength, not weakness. I see a woman who survived something that should have broken her, and I see someone who thinks she must walk alone, even when she doesn't have to." His words felt like a wound being touched gently. She looked away, afraid he would read the truth in her face. After a long silence, he knelt in the dirt near her, lowering himself so they were nearly level. Not close enough to startle her, but close enough for her to hear the warmth in his breath when he spoke. "That kiss meant something to you. Not fear, not regret. Something deeper." She felt her chest tighten. She opened her mouth, but no words came. He continued before she could speak. "And you ran because that feeling frightened you more than any danger in these plains." She looked up sharply. "How do you know that?" His eyes held hers with a calm that shook her. "I know how people run. I know why they run. Some run because they fear pain. Some because they fear truth. And some because they fear wanting something they believe they cannot have." Lyria felt a deep ache inside her at those words. She clenched her hands, struggling with the storm building inside her. Roken watched her closely, as if trying to understand which storm it was. She finally found her voice. "You don't know anything about what I came from. Then tell me," he said softly. "Why? Or because if I do, you will step into danger that belongs to me, not to you." He held her gaze, unblinking. "The land teaches us that danger shared is danger halved. A lone rider is easier to strike than to who stand back to back." She shook her head again. "You don't understand? Some men don't stop. Some men don't forget. Some men believe your life is theirs to own forever." Roken's expression darkened, but not with anger at her. With something else, something like a quiet promise forming in the shadows of his mind. "Who hunts you?" he asked. Her throat tightened. She couldn't say the name. She never wanted to hear it again. The memory of heavy footsteps, the weight of a calloused hand gripping her arm, the harsh voice telling her she would never leave. These memories wrapped around her like cold metal. She turned away from Roken, unable to speak. He did not press her. Instead, he rose to his feet and stepped a short distance away, giving her time to gather herself. The sky above was turning darker as clouds swept in from the east. The wind grew sharper, brushing against the canyon walls. Lyria looked up at him, silhouetted against the moonlit ridge. He seemed so steady, so unmovable. A man shaped by the wild land itself. She wondered if anything could ever shake him. She wondered if he had ever been afraid of anything. After a moment he spoke again, his voice quiet but strong. "When I kissed you, I felt something change in the air. You felt it too. That is why you ran. Not because of your past, because of your future." Her breath hitched. She hadn't expected him to say that. Rokan stepped closer, his voice steady. "You think your past will destroy anything good that tries to reach you? But the land teaches us that new roots can grow even in burnt soil. Some things survive the fire." She blinked hard. Fighting back emotion, Rokan took one more step and stopped only a few paces away. "You can run from me, Lyria. You can run from that kiss. But you cannot run from the truth. And the truth is already moving toward you faster than your past ever did." She felt a chill ripple through her. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes shifted toward the canyon entrance. His expression sharpened. His shoulders lifted slightly, as if he sensed something in the wind. Lyria followed his gaze, her pulse quickening. The canyon seemed suddenly colder. Rokan spoke in a voice lower than before. "You are not the only one out here tonight." Her stomach twisted. "What do you hear?" He didn't look at her. His whole body stilled, his breath slow, listening. The wind carried faint sounds through the narrow passage. Soft, distant, unfamiliar. "Voices," said quietly. Her heart dropped. "Not ours." She rose from the ledge, fear tightening around her. "Who is it?" Rokan turned toward her, his expression hardened with focus. "Stay close," he said. "Do not run again." The wind pushed against the canyon walls with a low hum, as if warning them. Lyria felt the same fear she knew from her past, rising fast in her chest. But this time, she wasn't running from a kiss. She wasn't running from her feelings. Something else was coming. Something she had hoped she would never find her. Rokan stepped in front of her, standing between her and the danger she could not yet see, and in the cold breath of the desert night. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly through the canyon. The footsteps came slow at first, as if whoever walked the canyon was feeling their way through the dark. Rokan lifted a hand, a silent command for Lyria to stay behind him. She obeyed, pressing her back against the stone again, her breath shallow. The cold air tasted of rock and dust, and something else now, something sharper. The memory of her past rose inside her like smoke, making it hard to breathe. Rokan shifted his weight, listening. His posture was calm, but every part of him was alert. Lyria watched the way his hand rested near the knife at his belt, not gripping it yet, only ready. She wondered how many times he had stood like this, between danger and someone who needed guarding. She wondered how many times he had been forced to choose whether to fight or walk away. The voices drifted closer. Men, at least 3, maybe more. Their words came in broken pieces. "Carried by the wind, trail cuts through here. Tracks are fresh. She can't be far." Lyria's blood turned to ice. She knew that tone. That hungry certainty. She clutched her hands together to keep them from shaking. Rokan heard it too. His eyes narrowed, catching her flinch. "These men search for you," he murmured. She nodded, unable to speak. Her heart hammered so loud she feared the men would hear it before they saw her. Rokan stepped sideways, sliding them both closer to a deeper shadow along the rock wall. "Listen to me," he said quietly. "You will do exactly as I say." She swallowed hard. "What are you going to do?" "Keep you alive," he answered, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. The first figure appeared at the mouth of the canyon, a dark shape against the weak moonlight. Then another. Then a third. All 3 carried rifles, their boots scraping against the stone. They moved with the rough confidence of men who had spent years following dust trails and broken tracks. The one in front wore a wide coat and a hat pulled low. Even from a distance, Lyria recognized the broad set of his shoulders and the way his head tilted as he studied the ground. "Bran," she whispered, barely a breath. Rokan turned his head an inch.
"Ow."
"Bran." She nodded. He used to manage a freight line back east. He knew every road, every shortcut. If he was here, it meant her past had grown long arms. Rokan's gaze hardened. Is he the one who owned your life? No, she said, voice thin. He works for the man who thinks he still does. Rokan understood enough. The canyon swallowed his next breath, heavy with decision. The men reached the center path, stopping near the prints she had left in the dust. Bran knelt, touching the track with 2 fingers. Light. Woman's step. Running hard. He glanced up, his face half lit by the moon. His eyes held a mean patience. He had done this many times before. He enjoyed the hunt far too much. Another man, lean and sharp-faced, shifted his rifle. You sure she came this way? Bran rose. You doubting me, Hass? The lean man shook his head quickly. Just asking, Bran. Canyon's a tight place for chasing. Easy to get pinned in? Bran snorted. That's the point. The third man, younger than the others, rubbed the back of his neck. His name drifted to Lyria's mind like a bitter taste. Colic. She remembered his hands loading crates, his nervous eyes always watching stronger men for orders. She had never seen cruelty in him before. Only fear. But fear in the wrong hands could be as dangerous as any weapon. Rokan studied them quietly, then leaned close to Lyria's ear. How long have they hunted? Months, she breathed. Maybe longer. I changed names, towns, everything. I thought the frontier would be too wide for them to cross. He exhaled slowly. Some men will cross any distance if they believe another person is theirs. Her throat tightened. He had just given words to the thing that had haunted her since she fled her old life. Bran scanned the canyon walls. His gaze moved over the rocks, the cracks, the shadowed ledges. For a moment, Lyria feared his eyes would land on their hiding spot. Rokan barely moved, but she could feel the tension humming through him like a bowstring. The younger man spoke. What if she already slipped out? Maybe this wind wiped half the tracks? Bran shook his head. No, she's close. I told the boss I'd bring her back, and I don't break my word. The words slammed into Lyria. The boss. The man who once slipped a ring on her finger like a shackle. The man whose wealth bought men like Bran. The man who believed she had no right to breathe, unless it was under his roof. Rokan's jaw tightened. Who is this boss? He asked softly. She closed her eyes. His name is Davon Cole. He runs a river line back east. Owns freight, land, people. He thinks I betrayed him when I left. Called it theft of his property. Rokan's hand curled slowly at his side. You are not property. Tell him that, she whispered bitterly. I will, Rokan said, the calm that sent a strange heat through her. She could not tell if it was hope or fear. Down in the canyon path, Bran motioned to the others. Spread out. Look for any side cuts. If she found a ledge, she might be watching us now. The thought made Hask tense. I don't like being watched by someone I can't see. Then find her, Bran growled. Rokan turned his head slightly. They will search the walls. We cannot stay in this shadow for long. What then? She asked. He considered the canyon's curves, mapping them in his mind. There is a side crack behind us that leads to a higher trail. Steep, loose stone. Dangerous. But it opens to the ridge where the wild herd beds for the night, Lyria pictured. The wild horses she had often watched from the ranch ridge. Strong, fast, restless. The thought of them brought a small strength to her chest. Can we make it without them hearing us? She asked. We can try, he answered. But there is one more choice. Her heart jumped. What choice? I go down and lead them away, he said. You climb alone. When it is safe, you return to the ranch or ride with the herd if you must. The idea sent a spike of panic through her. You can't face 3 armed men by yourself. I have faced worse than 3 men, he replied quietly. She shook her head. If they realize you are helping me, they will hunt you too. He shrugged one shoulder. Let them try. His calm shook her more than any threat. No, she said. I will not let you stand alone in danger that belongs to me. He looked at her in a way that made her chest ache. It stopped belonging only to you when you stepped into my land, Lyria. For a moment they stared at each other, words hanging heavy between them. Somewhere deep in the canyon, a pebble clattered as one of the men kicked it by mistake. The sound snapped them both back to the present. "We do this together," she said, her voice steadier than before. "You said a lone rider is easier to strike." Roken studied her, then gave a short nod. "Very well." Together, he moved first, guiding her toward the narrow crack behind them. The rock pressed tight against her shoulders as they slipped into the dark passage. The path rose sharply, the stone loose beneath their boots. Loose pebbles skittered downward with each step. The sound felt too loud in the tight space. Roken moved with careful precision, placing his weight where the rock would hold best. He offered his hand when the climb grew steeper, his grip strong and sure. Lyria took it, feeling a small comfort in the solid warmth of his palm. Below, Bran's voice echoed up. "Watch the walls." She was never strong. She favored easy climbs. Lyria winced. The words were meant to belittle, but they lit a stubborn fire in her chest. She tightened her grip on Roken's hand and pushed herself higher than she thought she could go. They reached a narrow shelf halfway up the canyon, pausing to catch their breath. From here, they could see the three men scattered along the floor below. Bran stood near the center, scanning every crack. Hask checked a low ledge. Kolek lingered at the back, shifting his weight nervously. Roken's eyes narrowed. "The young one is unsure," he murmured. "Fear lives in his hands." Lyria watched Kolek, remembering the way he used to flinch when Bran barked orders. He must have followed for pay or duty, not because he enjoyed the chase. That kind of man could be turned, she realized. Or broken, Roken continued. Men like him sometimes choose a different path when truth hits them, or they sink deeper to prove themselves. Bran suddenly looked up, as if sensing movement above. Roken pulled Lyria against the rock, keeping them hidden in shadow. Bran's gaze swept the walls, then moved on. He motioned the others forward. "They're heading deeper," Lyria whispered. Roken nodded. "Good. They expect you to run away from them." Not above them, they crept along the shelf, moving toward the side of the canyon that sloped into a rough trail. The air thinned a little, cooler against her damp skin. Every step felt like walking along the edge of a blade. As they moved, Lyria's thoughts drifted backward again. To the night she fled Devon Cole's house. To the sound of rain on the roof as she packed what little she owned. To the housekeeper, an older woman named Mirren, pressing a small coin pouch into her hand and whispering, "Go, child. Run before he returns." The memory of that kindness tightened her throat. She had left behind the only person who had ever tried to protect her, and she had never heard what became of her. Roken noticed the shift in her breathing. "You are thinking of someone?" She nodded. "A woman who helped me escape. I owe her more than I can pay. If she guided you to this land," he said, "then part of her walks with you now." The simple belief in his voice made tears sting her eyes. But she kept moving. At last they reached the top cut of the canyon. The world opened up again, wide and cold. The ridge stretched out before them, rising and falling in soft waves. In the distance, under the pale wash of the moon, dark shapes lay scattered across the ground. The wild herd. Silhouettes of strong backs and long manes rested against the horizon. Rokon's shoulders eased a fraction. "The horses know this land better than any man," he said. "They will sense trouble before we do." He led her along the ridge, keeping low to the ground. Below them, the faint glow of campfires from a distant town flickered against the night. The world seemed peaceful from up here. Yet Lyria knew danger walked the same earth behind them. From the depths of the canyon, Bran's angry shout reached the sky. "Tracks end here. She's gone up." Lyria froze. Roken's hand closed around her arm, steadying her. "They know," she whispered. "Yes," he said. "But now the land favors us." How he glanced toward the herd. Because men who chase on narrow trails forget that animals follow their own law. If those horses startle, the ridge becomes a storm of hooves. Her eyes widened. "You would send the herd against them." "If I must," he answered. "Better they face the judgment of the wild than drag you back to a life you did not choose." The thought frightened her and gave her a strange comfort at the same time. She looked at the sleeping herd, then at the dark canyon mouth where the men would soon climb. What if they reached the ranch? She asked. What if they threatened the people there? Roken looked toward the far lights where the ranch lay hidden beyond the rise. The ranch had its own story. A hardened owner named Garen, a trail boss called Pike, riders who trusted steel more than words. Some respected Roken, some barely tolerated the Apache, even after he had rescued their cattle from rustlers more than once. If Bran reached them with claims and money from Davon Cole, loyalty could be tested in ugly ways. We must reach the ranch before Bran does, Roken said. You must tell Garen the truth of who hunts you. If he knows you are not some thief running from a debt, he will think twice before trading you for coin. Lyria shook her head. And if he does not care about truth, then Roken said quietly, he will learn what it means to stand against an Apache who has given his word. The air around them felt charged. Lyria realized that the conflict was no longer only between her and the men from her past. Now the whole frontier was pulling into it. The ranch, the town, the wild horses, even the old grudges between settlers and Apache bands. Every choice she made from this point would tug on each thread. She looked at Rokan. Why are you doing this for me? You could turn away, and no one would blame you. His answer came without hesitation. Because the land gave me eyes to see, and I see a woman who refuses to bow to a man who treats her like a possession. Because my people know what it is to have others claim they own our land, our lives. And because, he added, voice low, when I kissed you, I knew my path had already shifted. Her heart jumped. The conflict inside her deepened, tangled now with something warm and terrifying. From the canyon, the scrape of men climbing reached them again. Roken turned toward the ridge trail leading toward the ranch. Come, Lyria, night is not done with us yet. They started toward the distant lights, the herd beside them like silent guardians in the dark, while the hunters they had not yet faced climbed, steadily closer behind. Night stretched wide over the ridge as Roken and Lyria pushed forward, moving as quickly and quietly as the uneven ground allowed. The wild herd shifted in their sleep behind them, lifting their heads as if sensing the tension running through the land. Far below, faint voices echoed up the canyon walls as Bran and his men struggled up the narrow path. Every sound carried too clearly in the night air. Lyria's breath tightened with each step, and even the wind felt sharp against her skin. Roken stayed close beside her, scanning the distant hills for signs of danger. His calm steadied her, but it couldn't silence the fear building inside. She knew they were racing against time, racing against men who had spent months crossing land and rivers just to drag her back to a life she refused to return to. She didn't know how much longer she could keep running. She didn't know how much longer Rokan could protect her without placing his own people, his own land in danger. The ridge narrowed, and loose stones tumbled down the slope with each step. Lyria stumbled once, nearly losing her balance. Roken caught her by the arm before she could fall. Careful, he whispered. The earth is thin here. She nodded and steadied herself. She felt the ache in her legs from the climb and the sting of cold air in her lungs. The ranch lights glimmered faintly in the far distance, like fireflies floating above the hills. They seemed so close, yet impossibly far. Roken pointed across the valley. When we reach that rise, we will see the main trail that leads to the ranch. If we move quickly, we might get there before Bran realizes we left the canyon. Lyria forced herself to keep walking. Her thoughts spun in circles. She had hoped her past would fade once she crossed into the frontier. She had hoped that a new name and a quiet job at the ranch would hide her. But the world had a way of pulling old shadows toward her, no matter how far she traveled. And now those shadows threatened to pull Roken into danger too. She glanced at him. He walked with focused silence, every sense alert. His presence made the world feel a little less frightening, yet she couldn't forget that his people, his tribe, had already faced enough struggle. She didn't want to be the reason more trouble came for him. Roken stopped suddenly and lowered himself to the ground. Lyria crouched beside him. He pointed to the soil. Fresh horse tracks, he murmured. 4 or 5 animals? Her heart skipped. Bran, no, Roken said. Their horses are still in the canyon. These tracks are older, maybe from Pike's riders or someone from the ranch. But it means others are traveling this land tonight. She scanned the dark fields. Do you think they saw Bran's men? Possible, he said. And if they did, trouble is moving toward the ranch faster than we are. The thought tightened her chest further. The ranch owner, Garen, was a hard man. He valued order, coin, and reputation more than sentiment. If Bran reached Garen first and waved enough money, Lyria would have no one to defend her except Rokan, and Garen had never trusted Rokan. He tolerated him only because Pike, the trail boss, insisted the ranch needed Rokan's skill. But money could tilt scales. Lyria had seen it too many times before. They pressed forward again, moving faster. As the ridge opened into a wide slope, the wind grew stronger. It pushed at their clothes and whipped Lyria's hair across her face. The sky shifted, clouds crossing the moon and casting shadows over the land. The ranch lights flickered in the distance. The world seemed to blur between danger and hope. Halfway down the slope, a sudden sound broke through the wind. Roken froze. Lyria's breath halted. The sound came again. A distant clatter like hooves striking stone. Roken's eyes narrowed. Not the herd. Horses moving fast. Lyria's stomach twisted. Could Bran have reached riders already? Could his men have found mounts and circled around? Roken pulled Lyria behind a cluster of rocks. Stay low, he whispered. The thunder of hooves grew louder. Rokan raised his head slightly, watching the dark line moving across the valley floor. A group of riders, maybe 6 or 7, approached the ridge with torches in hand. The flames flickered wildly in the wind. Lyria felt her heart drop as she recognized Pike's tall frame among them. But Pike wasn't alone. Garen rode beside him, and behind them rode 3 strangers she didn't recognize, men carrying rifles across their saddles. Bran's men. They had reached the ranch. Lyria covered her mouth to keep from gasping. Roken watched the riders with a cold, controlled expression. They reached Garen, he said. The hunt has widened. The riders slowed as they approached the slope below the ridge. Garen held up a hand. Spread out. If those tracks lead where Pike says, she's somewhere ahead. And whoever's with her is coming too. The words hit Lyria like a blow. Garen wasn't siding with her. He was siding with money. Roken leaned close, voice low. We go around the ridge on the far side. We avoid them. If they see us now, they will cut us off from the ranch and push us toward the canyon again. Lyria nodded, fighting the panic rising in her chest. But as they moved, a loose rock skidded under her foot. It tumbled down the slope, bouncing against the earth. The sound echoed just loud enough for one of the riders to hear. A stranger held his torch higher. Someone's up there. Roken grabbed Lyria's hand. Run. They sprinted along the ridge, the wind smashing against them. Riders shouted behind them. Hooves thundered. Torches swung wildly. Roken guided her toward a narrow cut between rocks. But a shout rose from behind them. There over the rise, a rifle cracked. Lyria ducked instinctively, fear jolting through her. Roken threw an arm around her shoulders, pulling her downward behind a low boulder. Stay close, he said, his breath steady even now. Another gunshot echoed. A stone shattered near them. The ridge was too open, too exposed. They couldn't outrun horses on this slope. Roken looked toward the wild herd again. The animals were waking, their shapes shifting restlessly in the moonlight. Their instincts were rising with the noise. Lyria saw the thought in Roken's eyes as clearly as if he had spoken it. You're not thinking of running into the herd, she whispered. He met her gaze. It might be the only way to lose riders on horses that don't know the terrain, but they'll stampede. She said, They will if the wind pushes them, he replied calmly. And tonight, the wind is on our side. Her fear twisted sharply. Will we survive that, if we move with them, not against them? How do we do that? Trust the land, he said. And trust me, voices behind them grew louder. Another shot cracked through the night. A torchlight beam swept dangerously close. Pike's voice shouted through the wind, "Surround the ridge. Don't let them slip through." Lyria's pulse roared in her ears. Roken took her hand again, gripping tightly. "We run to the herd," he said. "When they rise, stay beside me. Do not break away. If one rider manages to follow, I will handle him." "But Roken," she whispered, "they're armed." He shook his head. "Guns don't rule the plains. The land rules the plains." The certainty in his voice sent a fierce warmth through her chest, but fear tightened around her still. She didn't want to drag him into chaos. She didn't want him hurt because of her, but there was no turning back now. Bran's men, Garen, Pike, riders with rifles, torches in the wind, they were all closing in. Roken drew her close, their faces inches apart. His eyes held no fear, only resolve. The kind that came from a life forged through storms. "Lyria," he said quietly, "the land shifts us toward what we must face. You came here seeking freedom, but freedom must be fought for. Tonight, we fight to keep what you chose." She swallowed hard. "And what did I choose?" His voice dropped to a low, steady tone. "A new life, a new path, and the chance to decide your fate, not theirs." The wind rose hard behind them, roaring across the ridge. Torches flickered below. Horses snorted uneasily. Roken stood, pulling her to her feet. It's time they sprinted toward the wild herd. The shadows of the horses rose like a wave across the ridge, their bodies shifting as the wind swept through them. The lead stallion lifted his head, sensing danger long before the riders reached the slope. His ears pinned back. His hooves scraped the earth. He tossed his mane, sending dust swirling into the air behind Lyria and Roken. The first riders crested the ridge, rifles raised. Bran shouted, "There they are!" Roken didn't look back. He ran straight toward the herd, pulling Lyria beside him. The stallion reared, his silhouette rising against the moon like a force born from fire and wind. The other horses surged, their bodies shifting into motion. Hooves pounding the ground. The stampede was seconds away. Lyria felt the earth tremble under her boots. The air thickened with dust. The world roared. Roken turned to her, his hand tightening around hers. "Stay with me," he said. "No matter what," the herd thundered forward. The riders behind them shouted, the wind howled across the ridge, and everything in Lyria's world rose to a breaking point as she ran with Roken. Straight into the heart of the storm, the ground shook. Under Lyria's feet, as the wild herd thundered past, a wall of pounding hooves and sweeping manes. Dust filled the air until the moon faded behind a storm of motion. Roken never let go of her hand. He guided her through the chaos with the instinct of someone born to the land, moving in rhythm with the horses rather than against them. Every breath she took felt stolen from danger, but his voice anchored her. "Stay close. Move when I move." They weaved between the massive bodies, keeping near the flank of the lead stallion. The riders behind them tried to follow, but their mounts panicked the moment they approached the stampede. Lyria heard shouting, curses, the scrape of hooves skidding on stone. A torch hit the ground and went out. Another was dropped as its rider fought for control. Roken tugged her sharply to the left. A loose boulder crashed down where she had stood a second earlier. The herd's rush sent tremors through the ridge until the whole world felt like it was heaving beneath them. Then, just as quickly as it began, the fury began to ease. The wild horses veered down the slope, fanning out across the lower fields. The ground steadied. The air cleared. And silence slowly returned, broken only by the wind brushing through the sagebrush. Lyria stopped, burning, legs shaking. Roken stood before her, checking her quickly for injury. "You are safe," he said. His voice trembled only slightly. She looked around. The riders who had chased them were scattered. Some were thrown from their mounts. Some crouched behind rocks, coughing from dust. But none were close enough to reach them. Bran was the last to appear. He crawled up from a low trench, his coat torn, his hat missing. Rage twisted his features, but fear sat behind his eyes. The stampede had humbled even him. He looked at Rokon and Lyria with a hatred that burned like fire, but without the power he carried before. Rokon stepped in front of her, prepared to defend her again. But Bran didn't lift his rifle. He didn't even reach for it. He stared at the land around him, the scattered horses, the broken plan, and something inside him cracked. Pike rode up behind Bran, dust covering his coat. He didn't raise his weapon either. Garen followed, looking shaken. Even his pride had taken a blow from the wild force of the land. The strangers who rode with them were too frightened to speak. Bran spat dirt from his mouth. "You got lucky tonight. The herd saved you." Rokon shook his head. "The land saved her, because she belongs to it now." Bran glared at Lyria. "The boss isn't done," he growled. "He'll come himself if I don't bring you back." Lyria stepped forward slowly, surprising herself. Her voice was steadier than she expected. "I'm not going back. Not ever. And if Davon Cole comes here, he will find nothing he can claim. I am not his property, not his responsibility, and not his fear." Her words echoed across the ridge. Bran stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. Not as prey, not as someone running, but as a woman standing on her own ground. Rokon placed a hand over hers. She did not belong to Davon Cole then, and she does not belong to him now. Garen finally spoke. His voice was low, but his eyes showed something rare for him. "Respect. The ranch isn't a place for men like Cole to come demanding what isn't his. If he sets foot near my land, he'll answer to every rider under my roof." Pike nodded in agreement, and the town will hear the same. No man owns another, especially not through fear. Bran looked from one to the other. He knew what it meant. His power here had faded. He was outnumbered by the land itself. After a long moment, he lifted his hands. "Fine, I'm done here." He turned away, motioning for the strangers to follow. Kolek hesitated, glancing at Lyria. For the first time, she saw guilt in his eyes. He lowered his head and rode after Bran without a word. The ridge quieted. The danger passed like a storm moving across the horizon. Only the echoes remained. Rokon exhaled deeply, the first true breath he had taken since the night began. Lyria felt her legs weaken as the weight of the fear finally lifted. When she looked at him, she saw concern soften into something deeper. Something that had been building between them since the day he first saved her from the frightened mare at the ranch. "You are brave, Lyria," he said. "You faced him without running." "I'm tired of running," she whispered. He stepped closer, brushing dust gently from her cheek with his thumb. The moonlight lit his eyes in a way that made her heart lift. "The land brought you here for a reason. Not to fear your past, but to claim your future." The warmth in his words spread through her chest. She felt a steadiness rise within her, a new kind of strength. Pike cleared his throat gently. "We should head back before more trouble finds us out here." Rokon nodded, keeping her hand in his. The group rode slowly toward the ranch, the wild herd trailing peacefully across the fields. The night grew quiet again, and the stars glimmered overhead. Lyria felt the tension loosen from her shoulders as the familiar lanterns of the ranch came into view. When they reached the yard, the ranch workers came out, murmuring in surprise as they saw the dust-covered riders. Garen stepped down from his horse and faced Lyria once more. "I misjudged you," he said. "The man after you made it sound like you were a thief, but tonight proved otherwise. You've earned your place here if you want it." Lyria nodded, her voice soft. "Thank you." Garen looked at Rokon next. "Seems we owe you again." "You saved more than cattle this time," Rokon didn't answer. He only gave a short nod, the kind a man gives when praise is not needed. As the others dispersed, Lyria and Rokon walked toward the corral where the air smelled of horses and warm hay. The ranch lanterns cast long shadows across the ground. The quiet felt like a blanket after the chaos of the ridge. Lyria leaned against the wooden fence, watching the horses settle. Rokon stood beside her, his presence calm and steady. "Thank you," she said. "You didn't have to help me this far." He looked at her with a softness that made her breath catch. "When I first saw you, I saw someone searching for a home. When I kissed you, I realized I had found one too. Her heart warmed, rising gently like dawn. The danger is gone now, she said quietly. Does that mean you'll leave? He shook his head. I stay where my spirit is at peace, and it is at peace near you. She felt tears sting her eyes, but they weren't from fear this time. They were from relief and something deeper she had tried not to name. Roken took her hands, his grip warm and steady. You came west seeking freedom. Now you have it. Not because you ran, but because you stood your ground. And now you can build a life that is truly yours. She nodded, the truth settling in her heart. I want that, and I want you in that life. A slow, warm smile touched his lips, the kind she had never seen from him before. Then you have both. The wind brushed softly across the yard. A horse snorted in the distance. The night finally felt safe. Lyria stepped closer, resting her forehead against his chest. His arms circled around her, strong and certain. The fear that once ruled her steps faded into the quiet of the ranch night. The frontier had tested her, chased her, nearly broken her, but it had also shown her her own strength. And it had brought her Roken, a man carved from the land and loyal to the truth. She looked up at him, her voice a soft whisper. So what happens now? Roken brushed a strand of hair from her face. Now, he said, we begin again. With that, the night settled around them, peaceful and steady. As their new life stretched ahead like the wide-open plains, the danger behind them, the future open. And for the first time in a long time, Lyria felt free, and she was not alone.